Shut up and sit down.
The current state of politics is unsustainable, politically, economically.
You still have distrust there.
We all come from very different places.
Man, we don't want the government to do a damn thing.
We deserve better.
People have to have the information in front of them.
It is about supporting, platforming, and assisting the people who are out here actually doing the fight.
There you go. Like, just promote people who are doing something. Volunteer to work with people who you like. And
just take an issue that's important to you and do something.
You are part of that declaration against tyranny.
This conversation gives me a little more hope for the future.
The one, the only
fight for liberty. This is the cherry on top.
Welcome everybody back to another episode of the Fight for Liberty show. Tonight we're going to be going through the ins and outs of liberty business owning and activism through capitalism. And I'm actually going to skip over the sponsorship bit night because pretty much the whole show is going to be a little bit of a sponsorship bit as we are interviewing the founder of both Blood of Tyrants and Nugg of Knowledge, our two great sponsors that have been with us almost since the beginning of the show. So without further ado, we're going to bring him on up. Mr. Dan, Taxation is Theft Behrman, welcome to the show. Oh, it's going great. So I'm just going to jump right into it. We're going to go chronological order and tell me, where did the idea for Nugg of Knowledge come from?
I like weed. Yeah, it was. So I've had the Taxation is Theft store online for a while. Obviously, I've kind of like always been into e-commerce. And then somebody just reached out to me and they were like, "Hey, actually, I think the first person who was like, you should sell this stuff online. It was just like CBD." Like CBD flower, and I was like, okay, well, that's interesting, but like I wouldn't smoke that. That's weird. And then like just after that, I started hearing about THC Delta-8, and I was like, wait a minute, this is legal and you can sell this like pretty much all over the country. Basically I started looking into it. Turns out I had a friend who was already in the business. Yeah, we just got started packaging this stuff and shipping it out, put up a website and got to work. It's not easy, of course, because there's still all kinds of regulations for advertising. Actually, a lot of it's not even regulations, it's just like platforms that don't want to do it, right? Like you can't advertise on Facebook and all the social media networks. You can't do it on YouTube. Most of the ad networks are, they won't do that. They won't do alcohol. So it's, advertising and finding an audience is a little bit difficult, but, there's plenty of those people out there. So, yeah, that's the short version, I guess.
Nice. And how do you come up with like the brand name and brand voice and that kind of stuff?
So I wanted it to be like, there's like a million like stoner branded like THC, like Delta-8 and Delta-9 companies out there. And I wanted to kind of get away from this idea that like weed is for stupid stoners who are unproductive and like just lazy and sit around on the couch all day. Like I wanted this to be a brand that would, identify with people who are either physically active or mentally active in business or whatever. Like, I mean, there are so many, like when I was a kid, like we used to just like, I say a kid, when I was a teenager, like we used to like, when we started smoking weed, we were kind of like, yeah, did you know this guy smokes weed? And like a lot of them were actors, but they were professionals. They were established. They were, they were successful. And then we would find out that, all these other people did it too. We found out Steve Jobs, for one. So like, people who were in business, people who are in sales, people who are successful. Like this wasn't like this whole thing was a myth. And so I know there's a lot of brands out there that are basically selling to that and playing off of like, you got like all the like fake M&Ms with THC in it and like this fake Snickers bars and like, just like stoner food. You have like Scooby snacks and like all these like crazy names that are just like, You know, they cater to that like stoner mentality, which is fine, because that's definitely like a phase you go through. But I kind of wanted to like market towards professionals and also start fighting the stigma that stoners are, you know, these types of people. I kind of wanted to like get out there and present this other type of personality of cannabis user.
Yeah, I feel like for most like stoner teenagers, they hit a point where they either grow out of it or they grow further into it, and it becomes like an actual medicinal part of their daily life, like their daily vitamin, and it's you know, don't really function correctly without it kind of thing. I remember I used to hide that I smoked like really carefully. I started smoking at like 18, and you know, my family didn't know, most of my friends that didn't smoke didn't know, none of my coworkers knew, and I kept that up for probably 2 or 3 years until I was in New York City working in finance, and I just realized that like everyone around me was also smoking. Everyone in the office, my direct boss, I smoked a joint with the CEO, who was like one of the founders of Deutsche Bank, and I'm like, there is absolutely no reason to keep hiding this. And I think the problem is the only people who are really outspoken about the fact that they smoke are the loser stoner types, because they don't care, and all the professionals felt like they had to hide it for so long. So we need more professionals that smoke to be like loud about it, and like, yeah, we actually, this isn't just for stupid people.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it's like you know, everybody's different. Like I know some people who consume it while they work. I don't, because I know it like it totally like throws off my concentration. But I do like to use it for like when I'm in a creative mood, and like, you know, I'm not on a deadline, I'm not on the clock, but I'm trying to be creative. Like, you know, I like to do that and come up with notes and brainstorm, and it really helps me to like get over like a writer's block. And then, you know, then it's like, you know, I have all these notes, and then, okay, when I'm ready to concentrate and it's kind of wearing off, then I can sit down and like go through and start organizing things and like, you know, do whatever I needed to do with it.
Yeah.
So it's like in some ways, and like, it depends on what your profession is. In some ways it actually makes you more productive. It just makes your brain function in a different way. And it's really just a stigma to say like, you know, like, you know, basically if they're saying cannabis breaks your brain, then what they're saying is your brain is perfectly normal before you smoke it, and none of us are normal. None of us are the same. So like, what's normal to begin with? So, you know, it's just absolutely insane to me how much they've demonized this. But of course, there's like a long history of corruption and you know, people doing this for political reasons. And it's also so bizarre because like, you know, when you're in the middle of something and it's changing and you can see it change, like you'll notice and like it becomes apparent to you. But when you grew up in the middle of something and like it's already been like well established for like 70 years before you, and your parents are like already they've been indoctrinated because that's all they believed in their whole life. It's like at that point it's like you really need to like it takes a lot of effort to tear down that wall and change that perception that we have of these things. And we're gonna see that 50 years from now, like with all this COVID stuff. Like it's going to be absolutely insane, but like 50 years from now, people are like, whatever is and like, you know, the people who disagree with it, those are going to be the crazy people who are just like, no, those are those crazy people, we don't know how they survive, they're like cockroaches. Like, you know, they don't believe in the narrative, which is what they told us about stoners when we were growing up. Like it was like, oh yeah, there's stoners, like, yeah, Cheech and Chong, oh they're like cockroaches, anyway, who knows how they survive. You know, they're very rare. Don't do that. You're going to be a burnout. You'll never be successful like them. And it's like when you have that kind of like put on you, it's like that creates that narrative when in reality, like it's not founded in reality at all.
Yeah. What blows me away is I'm trying to look it up right now just to like fact check myself, because I can't remember when it first got criminalized. But I feel like it was like the 40s 50s time period, right? It was somewhere.
I want to
there?
say like 30s, even a little bit. Yeah, but yeah, somewhere around there.
Okay, but still less than 100 years ago.
Right.
So,
but even then, like, it wasn't even like I think they had criminalized some stuff, but it wasn't like, you know, the war on drugs. That didn't really happen until the 70s because, you know, that's when all the drug users became like protesters who were a pain in the ass to the government.
Right. So what baffles me is my grandparents, who are like 83 and 87, something like that. So like the very beginning of the war on drugs was maybe like 10, 15 years before they were born, max. And they watched the rest of that ramp up in their teenage and young adult years, not even like as a kid. And they are still wholly bought into like all of the bullshit. Like my grandpa tried to start a fight with me on Thanksgiving. And I just like smiled and ignored him and just pretended I couldn't hear him, because he was going in about how there shouldn't be any dispensaries opening up in New York, because like 5 of them just opened. We finally have operational dispensaries in the state, and he was just going off about how it's horrible. And he was like, he said something about before you're my age, you're gonna have one of these, and held up his inhaler. And I'm like, I didn't say this because I didn't want to start a fight, but I was just thinking like, well, I don't have one of those. None of my 70, 80-year-old pot-smoking friends do. But you, who've never smoked pot, has one of those. So please explain to me how what I do is the dangerous thing, but you smoking cigarettes for 50 years was a totally reasonable choice.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's got nothing to do with logic. I mean, he didn't come to that conclusion on his own. Like, that's the result of propaganda and repetitive messaging.
Yeah.
I mean, it sucks because like we're all susceptible to it. Like, unless we see it coming and we willfully resist it, like that's the thing. Like, it's gonna happen. And I mean, the same thing happened with COVID. I mean, you know, we hang out with a lot of like really like freedom loving activists, but even a lot of them bought into the propaganda because like if you don't make a conscious decision to reject it and say, I don't believe this, I'm not going to go along with the narrative, then it's like you're going to allow all that stuff to get into your brain. And the more you hear it and the more you don't resist it, it just starts nesting in your mind and building like that. And so now we have people, I mean, like I was just watching a clip of, you know, somebody posted from a while ago of Neil deGrasse Tyson, you know, talking about, you know, he's having a debate with some guy, and he's like, and the other guy's like, but we don't know that the vaccine works. And Tyson's like, no, we do. That's what the trials were all about. And it's like, well, we know now those trials were bullshit and they never really happened. And we know now that like the efficacy that he was trying to push back then was never even real. Mm-hmm. And so it's like even he, you know, he's not stupid, but he trusted a system. And he even goes on to explain, we have a system right now. We have all these scientists and we trust them, and they're government, you know, regulated, organized, and all this other stuff. He trusted that system. And so he blindly listened to the result of that system. And, you know, there was no doubt in his mind that like, no, there's no corruption in the government. This is a scientific process and this is the result. So I have to trust the result. He didn't comb through all the data himself. I can guarantee you that, because the data didn't exist, right? Or it wasn't made public. So like, so that's the thing. If you trust the system and you trust the conclusion, like you don't even have the ability, especially if you don't have the data, you don't have the ability to think for yourself. And so when you look at like a lot of these, you know, a lot of these people who accept the, you know, the thing about cannabis, they don't think for themselves. They hear on TV, they see in movies, they get the DARE program, programming, you know, all this stuff happens to them. And they don't personally know anybody who's a functional pot user, or maybe they do, but they don't know that they're a pot user because they're keeping it hidden because of the stigma. And because of that, they don't have access to the data, and they don't think for themselves. And all they're doing is they're just becoming a conduit for the propaganda.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this kind of goes back to our conversation on Rounding the Earth with Matt Crawford about proxy trust and how, like, no one is really immune from it. But you know, you can try your best to at least vet the people that you do have proxy trust for, and you know, just always kind of be on the lookout for something that's not right.
Yeah. It's no, that's definitely a big part of it. And inherently, a lot of us trust the government because we go to government schools and we're taught by government employees that if anything bad ever happens, you call the government, dial 911. You know, like the police come and talk to us through the DARE program, and they're like, they tell us what to do. Like, they tell us how to behave in society, but it's like they're telling us to trust them. And we spend, as kids, like, I want to say, like, I spent more time with my teachers than I did with my parents. Like, if you add up the cumulative amount of time that you spend with them, and then of course, like, when you're like at night when you're sleeping, like, you don't spend as much time like in school, but like sleeping doesn't count because you're not really spending time with your parents, right? You're out in the playground playing with your friends, you go to the park, you know, whatever. That's not time spent with your parents. And so it feels like, you know, cumulative for the beginning years of your life, for the first 18 years of your life, you're spending more time with the government than you are with your own parents. Of course, you're going to build a bonding trust relationship with that organization, even though it's separate people and those people keep changing. Like, that's time when you should be bonding with your parents and your family and learning from them. But we're taught, like, oh no, your parents have to work. They have to be part of the system. And so therefore all their time is taken away and they don't have time to raise you. So, you know, oh, but that's okay. Just send them to the government and trust the government school and they'll take care of your kids.
Yeah. Hell, I'd wager that even as an adult, you probably interact with the government more than you do your parents. Between, you know, police, DMV, post office, like all these other things, gotta get on the phone with the IRS and all these other things. And I definitely
compared to Thanksgiving dinner and Christmas, and yeah. I mean, that's a fair assessment.
It's kind of
not me. I talk to the IRS, but
yeah. And I mean, I even had the great fortune of being homeschooled, so I don't necessarily identify with what you're saying per se, but I was still homeschooled off of a conservative Christian, like, super patriotic curriculum by army brat of a mother who, like, just loves God in this country. So it was probably almost worse than your average public school indoctrination, because it was straight up like pledge at the beginning of school all the way through schooling, like way past when they removed it from public schools, and like a whole lot of just extra indoctrination.
Wow. Yeah, and then it doesn't end, right? You don't get a break and you get to go home.
Oh, yeah, that was probably the worst.
Savage.
But so, talking about like the war on drugs and regulation and stuff, how did you guys react when some states started to regulate or ban Delta-8?
We're still shipping it everywhere. It's yeah, I mean, it doesn't really
I like that.
It didn't really affect us. And you know, I don't know. It's just so bizarre because it's like, I don't know. I don't see this being a big deal even anymore. Like, especially now that cannabis is like, I mean, every state is starting to legalize cannabis to some degree, and it's only like sliding down further. So I know there's still potentially some risk, you know, but it's like, you know, how often is somebody going to get arrested for possession of a joint, you know, taken to court, stand in front of a jury, and then the jury's going to sit there and convict them? Like, that's like that gets rarer and rarer every day. So yeah, it's you know, I guess in some ways it's a form of civil disobedience. But at the same time, I reject the concept that that property or possession of property can be illegal. There's absolutely nothing in common law where owning property itself is a crime, and that's basically what they're saying. So, and I know it's different because the government is might makes right. They're like the big gang organization with SWAT teams and everything else, and they have taken people off the street, out of their homes, and thrown them in prison cells for their entire lives for possessing property. But that's we have to completely reject that idea. And my own personal philosophy too is we have to be willing to stand up to the government, because if we just cave to everything they say, what is there? I mean, what's there to hold them back? The Constitution is just a piece of paper. Everyone's like, oh, the Constitution. No, it's a piece of paper. It's us that has to push back and hold them in their place. And there was this interesting story. I'm still trying to find this because I heard it a couple times from various people, and I can't figure out where it was, but it was somewhere in Thailand. They passed some sort of ordinance where you couldn't do something with your mannequins or something, and so to protest it, every single shop owner stuck their mannequins outside of their shop totally naked, and I guess it had something to do with nudity or something. I don't know. So they put these naked mannequins out as a protest, and so basically every single person was intentionally going out and violating the law. And there was so many people that are just they can't prosecute it. I probably totally butchered this story, and I don't know exactly how but I've been trying to find it and I can't find it. So, but the point is still the same. It's even the Freedom Riders with the Rosa Parks protests and everything else. People went down there to intentionally get on buses and ride in the illegal seats. They went down there to break the law, and a lot of them went to jail. I think Martin Luther King went to jail in that. You have to break the law to show that when you have a law and it's okay, well, this makes sense. Yeah, we don't want this, and it's just what's the big deal? You sit a couple seats back further. What's the big deal, right? But when you show that they're willing to beat the crap out of somebody and murder somebody and imprison somebody over these laws, then I think that's when you really stress the point that there's no law too small that they won't kill you over it. Right. And I think that's where you have more of the public who will morally object to okay, yeah, maybe I wanted them to sit further in the back, but I didn't want you to kill them. Or, yeah, I didn't want so much pot everywhere, but I don't want you to kill these people, or whatever the law is. Even the people who supported that law, I think once they see the lengths that the government will go to enforce it, some people, and I know there's plenty of assholes out there, but I think some people will start to see that and be okay, no, this is wrong. And I think even some of the people in the government are, they're going to be yeah, this is, I can't do this. This is crazy. So yeah, it's, we got to push back. We have to.
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of that whole waiting for the first one to go. There's, with the mindset of they can't arrest us all, there's going to be some, like you're saying, you're still going to have some arrests, and somebody has to be first and get arrested, and then somebody's got to be second and get arrested, and then there's got to be another 150 people that maybe some of them get arrested until we actually get to that point where, the mannequin story, there's just too much disobedience to continue, which is pretty much where we got to with cannabis. Most states, even deep red states with really, really heavy anti-cannabis laws, just aren't enforcing those laws anymore because they physically can't, and it's not worth it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Of course, it's I would say it's not enough. It's a good starting point, but you still got to repeal those things, because otherwise you end up with a law where it's just I don't like this person, I'll arrest him for something that we just normally don't arrest people for. Yeah. And then it can be used selectively, and that's that can be used for racism and all kinds of other bad purposes. So
yeah. And I mean, to go off of the cannabis issue to something else that we both feel very strongly about, given your hat, Like with the taxes thing, I've had 2 separate conversations just this week where people brought up either Irwin Schiff or John McAfee, and they were like, you don't need to be a martyr for the cause. It's not worth it. But it is. Like,
it is.
I would rather throw my life away in that way than throw my life away to just being a slave to a tyrannical government that's going to steal my money and my possessions, beat the crap out of me, and throw me in a cage just for trying to live my life.
Yeah. I mean, well, and here's the thing too with the IRS. Like, everybody is deathly afraid of the IRS. You've like every person in America has more likely been at higher risk of getting shot to death by a traffic cop than arrested and imprisoned by the IRS. Like, I was talking to one of the guys that runs one of the libertarian podcasts, and he's just like, no, I'm going to pay my taxes. Like, we need to repeal the law, and I'm not going to protest it because I got kids and family. And I hear this like so many times from libertarians and other people who are like, they're against the tax, but they're like, I'm not going to stop paying. And it's like, when was the last time the IRS ever actually threatened to put you in jail? Like, you're running on a belief that if you don't send them a check, if you don't file and send them a check every year, they're just going to come knocking on your door and take you away. And that's not how it works at all. What's the problem with this is, what I've done is, based on the research of Irwin Schiff and a lot of people that followed, is the income tax as it's enforced is unconstitutional. The income tax as it's written is constitutional, but it just doesn't apply to most people. And what they've done is, it's the same thing with the way that they tricked everybody into wearing vaccines and running unconstitutional mask mandates and all this other stuff. They trick us into following, and then everybody's just afraid to deviate, right? Like, there's a mask mandate. It doesn't matter if it's unconstitutional. People are like, well, I don't want to be the one to go to jail, and it's like, okay, but if you go to jail and you fight it, you're just going to say that this mask mandate was unconstitutional to begin with, and nothing's going to happen to you other than, that little couple days you spent in jail. And for some people that's too much. And it's like, that's absolutely insane to me. Like, you have to push back, because if something's unconstitutional, it doesn't get ruled unconstitutional just because like the Supreme Court's sitting around like, oh, let's see if there's anything unconstitutional. No, somebody has to challenge it. And that challenge usually starts with an arrest. Like, the reason you have Miranda rights is because somebody was arrested. Somebody named Miranda was arrested, and they went through this whole process. There's Terry stops, which is kind of related to the stop and frisk and everything else. There was a guy named Terry. He was arrested. He went through the process and went all the way to the Supreme Court, and they said, oh yeah, what the cops did wasn't right. All these cases, like, something went bad, but it started with somebody who was willing to stand up for their rights. In some of these cases, it was, there were criminals who were doing things that they shouldn't have been doing, but the government tried to basically railroad them in court, and so they were able to stand up for their rights there. But when you're not doing anything wrong and you have rights, if you don't stand up for your rights and say, hey, no, you government are not going to do this, then you're just going to comply with whatever they do. And at that point, it doesn't even matter what the law is, because they can just tell you to do whatever they want and you're going to do it. And it's like, then you don't even need legislation. That's like what living in a dictatorship is. That we got to stop that. We can't do that.
Yeah. Shit, last time I got arrested, I didn't even get read my Miranda rights.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, everyone gives that like a bigger, a much bigger meaning than what it actually is. And the thing is, like, they don't have to read you any kind of rights. The only thing Miranda does is if you say something to the police after you're arrested, they can't use that as evidence in court unless they read you your rights. And think about how stupid this is, right? Because like I've been arrested and I see all these people in there. They go to the judge and they're like, and then that cop didn't read me my Miranda rights, as if that's going to get them like released. Oh, well, he didn't read you your rights. Well, you're free to go. Like, no. Mm-hmm. But what's so ironic about this is like, okay, so you know your rights, kind of, right? Like, you know, you're supposed to be read your rights. You probably know what the Miranda reading is, like what rights they're going to tell you, which is basically you can ask for a lawyer and don't say anything, right? Don't talk to the police. And it's like you sat there running your mouth anyways before you were arrested. And it's like, so you knew your rights, you broke all these rules anyway, and then you're going to try to like get your case dismissed because they didn't read you your rights. And it's like, that's not how it works. So like this whole thing is like, and that's kind of a miseducation of like, you know, I mean, that's probably from us like growing up watching cops and robbers movies where it's like, oh, we got to read them their rights. And, you know, just all this bullshit, you know, cops and robbers stuff that's like not even real law. But that's where so much of us learn it, because they don't teach it to us in school. What they teach us in school when DARE comes around is like the DARE program. I want to do a FOIA request and get their curriculum, because I'm sure it's like written in there, because they said it to me and I know other people they've said it to. If you ever get arrested, do you think you should ask for a lawyer? Do you think it might make you look guilty? So basically they're telling you, yeah, don't ask for a lawyer. That's going to be bad. You're going to go to jail if you ask for a lawyer.
Yep. And
this is part of the DARE. This is part of like the, let's get the kids away from the parents. Let's put them in front of the police officers with the shiny badges, and let's tell them what to do if they ever get arrested to make our jobs easier.
Yeah. I think I might have one of the only cases in that I've ever been close to where the fact that they didn't read me my rights might actually help for one of the tickets, because it's two. One was unlicensed operation, but the other one was failure to update my address with the DMV, and there's no way for them to have known that the address was wrong unless I told them. And so that one,
and that's the first question they always ask: is this your current address?
Yeah,
like they always ask that. Like, yeah, they're fishing.
Yeah. And I even that one really annoys me, because technically the address is not the place that I live, but I just changed the address on my license back to it being my parents' house, which is the most permanent address where, like, if they're gonna send me like court summonses or things like that, that should be where it goes, because otherwise it's gonna get lost.
I mean, that's a perfect valid use of that address. I mean, like, I've got multiple addresses that I use for different things. And like, you know, what address are you supposed to put? Like, this is the thing, like, cops are like, they don't know the law. They don't go to law school. They don't know any of this shit. I've had cops tell me, because I have an out of state or out of country driver's license, well, you need to get a driver's license from here. And I'm like, I'm not from here. I'm not living here. I'm leaving. I'm actually on my way out of the state right now. And still, after all that, they'll tell me, well, you need to get a license from here. And it's like, no, that's not the law. But okay, thanks for your insightful legal wisdom. Like,
if you live anywhere in North America, you can drive anywhere in North America with any license from anywhere in North America.
Yeah. Well, no, here's the thing. Like, you actually, most states in the US, you can drive with any license from anywhere. Like, we're talking China, Korea, South America, Africa. Like, that's a thing. Most of these states have what's called a reciprocal driver's license law, where if that country accepts a driver's license from Texas or, you know, California or wherever, then your state is going to accept their license. Like, that's a thing. And, you know, cops don't even know this. There's a video I always refer to of like this guy driving around, like, I think it's Oregon, with a Lamborghini with like European license plates on it, and he gets stopped by the cops, and the cops are like, "Oh, those aren't real plates. You need plates from here." And he's like, "No, dude, I'm on vacation." And he's like, "You brought your car with you on vacation?" And he's like, "Yeah, dude, I'm a fucking billionaire." And it's like, I do this. This is normal. And the cops like trying to tell him like, that's not normal for people to take their, and it's like, dude, you don't know the law. And this guy had all kinds of import paperwork from customs and everything else. It's like, they don't know the law. they only know how to deal with like 90% of people who are like the ones who are like locals, they live there, and normal course of business, right? Those are the people they know how to deal with. Everything outside of that, like when somebody comes up with a foreign driver's, they don't know what to do because they're not lawyers. They don't know the law. They've only been trained how to deal with locals. And so like they'll try to figure it out, and they'll waste your time, and they'll give you bad legal advice. And you have absolutely no recourse. Like if I gave someone bad legal advice, of course they could sue me, right? But not a cop.
For the record, none of this is legal advice. We have an actual lawyer in the comments correcting us. So actually, for clarification, I'll read this. If you're talking to a cop before being under arrest, they do not need to read their rights, and it is admissible, which is true. That only counts like after you're being placed under arrest. So a little clarification there.
And this is like, this irritates me to like, I can't even tell you because here's the thing. What is an arrest, right? Well, first of all, it's not an arrest. Like if you read the Constitution, it says seizure, right? And so seizure means like you've been stopped, you've been seized, you've been taken, you're not free to go, right? But somehow the courts have decided, oh, no. When they put the handcuffs on you and then they put you in the car and start taking you to the police station, that's an arrest. But if you're just standing there talking to the police and you're not allowed to leave, you don't have the freedom to travel or the freedom of movement to walk around, but you don't have handcuffs on, that's not considered an arrest. That's considered being detained. And it's like, okay, well, wait a minute. What if I tried to walk away? Well, then you'll be arrested. So it's kind of
resisting arrest.
Arrested is because you haven't tried to walk away yet. So basically, you're under arrest. You have the gun pointed at you, even though it hasn't been taken out of the holster. And it just blows my mind that the courts have like sat there and said like, oh yeah, okay, I guess that's fine. And then they've lowered that. Well, since it's not an arrest, doesn't need a warrant, doesn't need probable cause, reasonable suspicion. So that's the standard. So they can stop you and detain you for reasonable suspicion, not probable cause, reasonable suspicion. And that's that Terry case. I was like, that's called the Terry stop. And that's when they can, we can pat you down just to make sure you're not armed because, officer safety. And this is the whole basis for the whole like stop and frisk thing and like all this other stuff. And the only reason that they've, I'm trying to remember this correctly, but I think the only reason that they've pushed back on the stop and frisk thing is because it might be racist. Not because it's a violation of people's rights, but because it might be enforced unequally across races. And it's like, that's great that you care about racism, but that's the wrong fucking reason. You shouldn't be doing that to anybody. It doesn't matter if you do it to everybody equally. That's wrong. And they don't see that.
So I feel like what it comes down to is until they place you under arrest, you just don't say anything, which is again what the lawyer in the comments is saying. Do not talk to police. And then there's that question, am I free to go, or am I under arrest? Like you basically just make them make that decision, so then all of those rights come into effect then. But nobody wants to do that because you always have that idea in the back of your head. You might be able to get away with a warning. You might be able to talk your way out of it. So if you just act nice, if you don't put up a fight, if you don't act like a douchebag, you might be able to get out of the situation, which is usually where I catch myself is like, I just get the social anxiety and the forced like niceness.
If I'm nice to him, if I play nice. Yeah. But that's the thing. Once they decide they're going to arrest you, there's nothing you can say. And they'll actually like, this is a strategy that they use. They'll actually hold you there and say, well, you're not under arrest because you haven't been put in handcuffs yet. You're not under arrest. And so don't worry, you're not under arrest. And they'll keep talking to you and asking you questions because they know they don't have to like give you your rights, and they know you're thinking you're free and you're going to get away because you're not under arrest yet. Oh, well, like, why would he care? He says I'm not under arrest. I guess I'm good. Let me just play nice and answer all his questions. But it's like, it's ridiculous. But to your point about like, am I free to go? Like I've seen a lot of people, like even that is, it's difficult to maneuver that. Like I've seen a lot of people who like, they pretty clearly know their rights more than the cop does, but they'll spend 10 minutes asking, am I free to go? Waiting for the cop to say, yes, you're free to go. And the thing is, like, they don't have to like the thing, like if you're a cop, you have to tell me, if I'm free to go, you have to tell me. No, they don't. And they won't, because they know if they don't tell you you're free to go, you'll sit there arguing with them and they can, try to keep working you. Mm-hmm. But like, if they refuse to answer whether or not you're free to go or whether or not you're under arrest, just say, okay, it was nice talking to you. I'm going to go on my way now, and try to walk away. And then you'll find out if you're under arrest or not, and whether or not you're free to go. Like sometimes that's the only way, because, they won't tell you. Sometimes it will, but sometimes they won't. And it's like, and you run the risk again. Like, well, if that's what you do, like, are they going to assault you at that point? Are they going to say like, oh, he's running for it, let's tase him? Yeah. And it sucks because there's some cops out there who are, trying to just do their job and enforce the law and all that nonsense. But there are some people who are out there for blood, and those, like, it's really scary that those people are basically given guns and a free pass by the government and by society. Because even when those cops do something horribly wrong, like, most of society is just like, well, what did that guy do wrong to deserve that cop to go off on him like that? That's how most people see it, like, instinctually. And that's back to the propaganda and the trust, the fake trust that we have.
Yeah, it's like it's like old school, like, abusive relationship mentality of like, oh, well, what did the wife say? Like,
right.
But yeah, and to your point about, like, cops just not understanding the laws at all. The amount of times that I have been almost arrested for things that are not illegal, or tried to be charged with things that are not illegal post arrest, because they'll, like, search my car. And then I had an officer try to tell me that a butterfly knife that opens into a bottle opener, no blade on it at all, was a felony in the state of New York because it looked like a switchblade. I'm like, you, sir, don't know what the word switchblade means.
Right.
Because even if there was a blade on that, a butterfly knife is not even illegal in the state of New York.
And it's not a switchblade.
Switchblades are a felony here. If it's, like, button operated, that is a felony. That's, like, a really serious weapons possession charge. You're better off with an unregistered pistol.
Something that looks like one isn't, like those little combs that look like a switchblade.
Yeah,
a little comb like those are legal.
Yeah,
so, like, that's bullshit. Yeah, it's insane. And like, failure to ID. Like, most of them don't understand what that. Most lawyers don't even know what that is. I had a cop pull that on me one time, so I went to go look it up. And of course, I couldn't do this while he was stopping me, but he was telling me if I didn't show him my ID, that he would charge me with failure to ID. So I go home later and I look it up. You can't charge somebody with failure to ID unless they've already been arrested for committing a crime, and then they refuse to ID. And even then, they don't have to show you an ID card or a passport or anything. They just have to give you their like name, address, and date of birth, or maybe just name, date of birth, something like that. And that's it. So, but these cops are running around saying like, no, you have to show me your ID card. And in many cases, if you haven't been charged with a crime, that you don't have to show them anything. Mm-hmm. And when I learned this and I started I was already, kind of in a network with a bunch of lawyers. This was in San Antonio. I talked to all these different lawyers and they had no idea about this. Like, they didn't know how the failure to, and it's like, you guys are criminal defense lawyers. How do you not know this? It's insane. But it's like, I talked to a criminal defense lawyer in New York, and like, this is the problem, right? Who are they educated by? Mm-hmm. The government. Like, you have to pass the bar exam, which is basically a government exam, which doesn't tell you how to argue a case. It tells you to accept the rulings. So, like, they'll ask you, like, how's this case going to play out? And you have to say how that case is going to play out based on all of the rulings that the high courts have already made. Not to challenge those rulings, but to accept them as given. So, like, for example, if you were to get a law degree, let's say 5 years ago, and you were to say, like, oh, well, somebody's charged with something with an abortion, right? And say, well, I'm going to, yeah, well, Roe v. Wade says this is not a crime, but we're going to challenge this and, well, guess what? That was overturned, right? Yeah. But if you would have argued that 5 years ago, even just a couple of years ago, before it was overturned, you would have failed the bar exam. And it's like, so you're being like forced, like not to think or not to challenge the laws or the rulings, but you're being forced to basically just go with everything that's already there. Mm-hmm. And so this is what you learn in law school. You're being educated by the government. Now, I have a friend who is a public defense attorney in New York, and he told me, like, he's listening to me talk all this nonsense about why you don't have to pay taxes and what all the definitions of the words mean and all this other stuff. And I'm telling him, like, look, it says what this word means right here. And he's like, he refused to believe me. And this is a bar certified lawyer, right?
If you're talking about how he's watching, because he's the one that's in the comments.
I didn't want to call him out, but I think it's a great story, because he came back to me a couple months later and he's like, I took what you said to me, and he looked up the definition of a child, mm-hmm. and he was able to get a case of one of his clients dismissed based on saying this person is not a child, when the entire courtroom is laughing at him because, like, what do you mean he's not a child? Look at him, he's a child. And it's like, well, that's not what the law says, and the law does not apply to him as a child because that's how it was written. And it doesn't matter what you think a child is. What matters is the law, because we're here to enforce the law. So here we have another case where most lawyers don't know, the prosecutors don't know, the judges don't know. They think it's crazy, but when they're forced to look at it, and then when they're forced to, like, read the law objectively, it's like, oh, well, I guess he's right.
Yeah, I was actually staying with him either during this case or just after this one, and he was telling me about that. And it is kind of hilarious what the legal definition of a child is not anything that you would think is normal.
I still got to catch up on that one, because I know I looked it up for, like, New York, and, like, if you're an emancipated minor, you are not considered a child. And it's like, so you could have an emancipated, I don't know if there's an age limit on that, but like an emancipated 10-year-old, I think you have to be 13, right? An emancipated 13-year-old in a court, and they're saying, like, this person's a child, and it's like, no, he's not a child, he's an adult. Like, well, he's emancipated, like, but it's like, that definition is extremely important, because it's not just a definition. Like, that is a matter of the law itself. That is part of the law itself.
Yeah. So I'll want to switch gears up to talk about your other company, Blood of Tyrants Wine. And I'm going to start off with the wonderful little video that you put together that we normally play towards the beginning of the episode, but we're going to cue that up right now. Maybe. So Blood of Tyrants Wine, you guys hear me say it every week. If you want to enjoy a nice night in while also sipping on the blood of your enemies and taking down the tyrannical state, Blood of Tyrants Wine is the choice for you. Go on over to bloodoftyrants.wine and order 17 bottles today.
Nice.
So tell me, I'm gonna similar questions towards the beginning. Where did the idea for Blood of Tyrants come from, and how did you get that brand up and running?
Man, I mean, I guess I'm a Thomas Jefferson fan. That's got something to do with it. But yeah, I mean, I'm always just kind of like thinking of how can we market stuff, because I'm an entrepreneur, but also how can we put a liberty twist on it. Mm-hmm. So I was like, red wine is like blood of tyrants. Okay, we can do something with this. and that was basically it. I went on a mission to find a winery that would make me a special brew, stick it in a bottle, put my label on it, and that's that. And it did so well that and this is what's great about it, because like, I mean, like I market the taxation is theft stuff, right? But that's like an extremely niche audience. Like that's a niche within a niche. Like half the libertarians don't even like it. Probably more than half the libertarians don't even like it. But you know, I'm like, how can we reach a wider audience, but also bring some sort of like freedom message with it? So everybody drinks wine, and it's not too overtly liberty. Like it's not like we're selling like, you know, assault rifles or anything, assault weapons. So it's like, you know, it's just like a, you know, tame little bottle of wine. It won't kill you. And but it has a very like strong freedom message to it. And like even my friends who are like total far lefties, they're like, oh yeah, that's great, I love it. Because you know, even to the left, it's like, well, Trump's a tyrant, so okay, yeah, to the blood of tyrants, right? So it's great, but it's a great conversation piece too. It gets people to start talking about, you know, what is freedom, what is liberty. Like tyrants are bad, right? I think pretty much everyone disagrees on what a tyrant is, but everyone agrees tyrants are bad. And that's a start. So you know, figuring out a way to kind of market a product, make some money, and also spread the message of liberty, like that's a win. And so it did so well, we're actually working on like expanding to like all kinds of other stuff. We got an energy drink coming up, and we've got some other cool stuff that we're going to be adding to the store soon. So and the energy drink was like, this was kind of like, you know, after we saw how well the wine was doing, I was kind of like, okay, but still a lot of people don't drink, and it's still kind of niche because it's like a 21 and up audience, right? But if we have an energy drink, and like, you know, the first thing I was like, okay, yeah, I'm not gonna put all this chemical crap in there that's like in every other one, right? So it's like, you know, a yerba mate kind of like, you know, natural caffeine kind of thing. You know, not like crazy amounts of sugar or all this other stuff. But so we're, you know, it's like, that's what it is, but it's like, it's something that everybody can enjoy and still have that same message, and, you know, share it with their friends. You know, someone comes over to your house, hey, you want to drink some blood of tyrants? It's, you know, it's a fun way to kind of start that conversation and introduce new people to the ideas of liberty.
Yeah, you get to kind of break out of that niche audience thanks to the entirely like horrible, divisive bullshit that is the current political spectrum, that both sides of the aisle think the other side of the aisle is a tyrant. And so they'll drink to the blood of tyrants without realizing that they're usually voting for them.
That's the next step. We gotta break them out of that.
Yeah, but I mean, I think, like you said, like just as a conversational piece and like a thought process starter, you know, if you go into it with that mindset of like you said, like, oh, Trump's a tyrant or whatever, but then you actually, like, you know, think about the quote, think about what tyranny is, and then see something on the news the very next day while it's still in your mind about, you know, something Nancy Pelosi did, and you're like, oh, well, that seemed kind of tyrant-ish. Huh, maybe.
Yeah, turn on people's tyrant radar.
Yeah, it's important to do, because right now I think everyone's tyrant radar is way down, and their like asshole radar is all the way up, and that's not really what's important.
Right. Yeah, it's about, you know, what's good for me, not what's, you know, what's I guess ethically right for everybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then another cool aspect of this too is like we've created an affiliate program out of this, because we wanted to be able to help others raise money, because I know, like, I've been demonetized and deplatformed a couple places, and I know everybody else has. So, you know, we're trying to help, you know, liberty oriented podcasters and news organizations and anybody else who's having a hard time monetizing, to basically have a direct advertising relationship with us, where they can make some money and pay some of their bills, and you know, do that. So it's like it's kind of giving back to the liberty community.
Yeah. So yeah, when you guys go to bloodoftyrants.wine and order those 17 bottles, make sure you use promo code F4L to get a little discount and help support the show, because yeah, Dan's awesome, and they work on giving back, which I think is awesome. Obviously, like, we did a little bit of work with Nugg of Knowledge, and then now with this, I like the fact that this has been a key part of both of those things that you've done, because it, like you're saying, it helps give back to the liberty movement, and most of us are not making much off of what we're doing. So any type of sponsorship, if we can sell somebody something that they might already like be in the market for, like a bottle of wine or a Delta-8 vape or something like that, it gives us that ability to make some money off of it, on top of you being able to make some money off of it and give back to the liberty movement that way. So it's kind of
absolutely and I mean, it's there's an interesting thing here too, where like well, two things. One is, like, ever since I started like fighting about the liberty movement, everybody's asking for donations, and what I found is, like, when you have something to give in return, so it's like it's more like you're purchasing something, whether it's a t-shirt or something else, people are more willing to give. And so if we're selling wine, you get something that's it's a great experience. It's something that's it's going to create a memorable experience, or it's something that you have that you're going to consume, and it's it's going to be more to your life than if you were just throwing money away. So it's great for that. And I can't remember the other thing I was going to say, but and you're the one smoking all that weed over there.
You gotta. To back a little bit to the earlier conversation, I cannot do my sales job or this quote unquote job without it. I'm way too tense sober.
Right.
Not a conversationalist. But yeah, I definitely agree that I hate fundraising with a burning passion. I have been a salesman since I was 17. I have sold most things you could think of selling. I can't sell nothing. Like, I can't sell just an idea. I know that most selling is selling an idea and selling yourself and like that whole thing. But without a punchline, I can't do it. I'm very, very bad at fundraising. My city council campaign raised like $150 total. I've done fundraising calls for other campaigns like Tom Queter and a few others, and gotten very, very little for their campaigns. It's just not something that I can do well. But you give me a product to sell and give me a phone list to call through, and it's a whole different experience.
Right. Yeah, it's I mean, well, I think this is a big thing too. It's like what do they say? Like the best salespeople are the people who sell things that they believe in. Mm-hmm. And it's like, when something is tangible, it's more easy to believe in it. And it's like, I mean, especially like as a Liberty candidate, it's like, well, what if we don't win? And because like your chances are already shit to begin with, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, what if we don't win? Then are we just like taking this money and like, should I feel bad about this? And like all these like other thoughts come in, and it's difficult. Like I've been through that trying to fundraise for my own campaigns. Mm-hmm. But it's like, yeah, if you have like a cause like the Liberty memes, wheelchair vans, and all that kind of stuff, it's like that money's going somewhere. Like I think that makes it easier to sell, and it also makes it easier for people to give. And like when you're getting a product in return too. Mm-hmm. And this was the other thing I wanted to say. It came back to me. So like we have a lot of people in the Liberty movement who this is what they do. They're activists. Whether they're doing podcasts and trying to reach out to people, or whether they're out in the streets talking to people, or whatever it is, they're activists. And then we have the other people in the Liberty movement who they have their jobs, they have their families, their homes, and everything else, and they have plenty of money. And so this is kind of a great way to connect those people together, so that we can use some of the money that you're probably sitting on. We give you something in return, which is a really nice bottle of wine. And it's not just a cheap wine. It's actually a really great wine. but then that also gives some money to the activists who are, this is their job, but there's no employer, there's no payroll, there's no paycheck coming around every week. And we just need, a simple conduit to get the money from point A to point B so that they can continue what they're doing. Because like what you're doing, this show, like all the people that you talk to and bring these ideas to, I mean, I had my show and I know it was a little show, like I never had a huge reach with it, but like I'm sure you get the same kind of comments, like people like wow, you opened up my eyes to all this other stuff. Like we're not Joe Rogan, but like what we're doing is reaching people with the right kind of message, that they're just not going to get. Like Joe Rogan's not going to give them this kind of message. I mean, like he's right on, I don't know, maybe 8 times out of 10, but like not always. And we bring a different perspective, and if we want to keep that in the marketplace and we want to reach as many people as we can, then we got to figure out a way to get money to the content producers and that sort of thing. So that's basically what we're trying to help out with this.
Yeah. And I think within the liberty movement, we definitely have our fairly wealthy people and even a couple of extremely wealthy people, but a lot of the movement is maybe not paycheck to paycheck, but close. And maybe they don't have $20 to just throw at a campaign, but they were already probably going to buy a bottle of wine this week, so might as well do it from Blood of Tyrants and give back to the movement, where you're not just yeeting money, you're still making purchases that you would have made that week. Maybe you already smoked Delta-8 and you're just getting it from here. Maybe it's a little bit more than your local smoke shop would have charged you, but you know where that money's going, and it's all going to a good place, like from top to bottom, instead of even if you're supporting your local smoke shop, the actual company making that stuff is something else that you don't know. And I think that also like really helps out the movement, where we have this avenue to give back to people while, like you're saying, still like getting something in return, because we might not be able to afford to just give it. But yeah, I think to your other point, that like there's a lot of people out here that this is their job, and I've done it for a couple of years off and on, where my only source of income was what people sent me on Cash App or what they bought from Nugg of Knowledge and stuff like that. So it's a rough world out there if this is what you choose to do with your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like we said earlier about, you have to push back, and a lot of people are afraid to push back because they have, families and all this other stuff. Well, okay, we're the activists who are out here pushing back. Buy some stuff from us. That's a great way to send us some money. That you're just investing in a product. It's not a huge it's not a huge takeaway from your life. It doesn't put you at risk because you're not at risk of being arrested for the activism that we're doing. But you are helping to support everything that we do. So absolutely. And if you're doing well, buy a case.
Heck yeah. Yeah, because what we were talking about earlier with the the people that have those families that they're not willing to risk, doing this stuff. You're 100% right. The best you can do is help out those people that are going to get arrested and set that legal precedent so that you don't have to follow those laws anymore. If I actually get to fight this case with the unlicensed operation and actually fight it thoroughly, and go through all of the crap and the months and months of bullshit that it's going to be, and all the trips out to Buffalo and back to set a legal precedence that you don't actually need to have a driver's license to drive in New York State, which we all know is actually the law, then you can do it. But for right now, I need you guys to buy some wine and some weed so that you can help me do it.
Dude, I'm just like, something just popped into my head.
I'm excited.
Okay, so I'm guessing you got to go to Buffalo because that's where this happened.
Yeah,
but you don't live near Buffalo.
Nope.
Okay, now normally, like, this would be normal in a crime, right? Like if you committed a crime out there, then they'd ask you to like go back out there for trial, but they probably wouldn't let you leave because it's an actual crime, like shoplifting or murder or something, right? But this isn't a crime. This is like, traffic tickets are misunderstood for being crimes, but they're not. They're really like civil. And I know we still have like the civil thing where it's like, you know, you know, if you have a contract with somebody, you'll go to the court in the city where the contract was signed. But here it's really you against the state, and they have this concept in interstate issues where, you know, if two people are from different states and the contract was signed, you know, where was it signed? Which federal court are you going to go to work this out? And there's kind of like they have this this I think it's the legal nexus of like where did this thing happen? And what's interesting is if you're in one city in a state and that's where you sign the contract, and then you move to another city in the state, it really doesn't matter, because it's like you can go to a different federal court because it's still an issue of state to state, right? I mean, I guess there's only one federal court, but for the region, but maybe not. But so anyways, so what I'm getting at is this issue is you versus the state. So, here's a perfect example. Okay, if it was you versus a bank, right? If you were going to sue a bank, and the bank has branches all across the state, you could sue them in any court in the state, right? Because they're everywhere. And so now it's kind of the reverse, because they're suing you, but it's the entire state versus you, and they have offices in every city. So by forcing you to drive, it's not like you're driving to another state. They're forcing you to drive to another side of the state for their convenience, for your inconvenience, so that they can try to extort some money out of you. I'm wondering,
supposedly illegally too.
Before, what's that?
So I said supposedly illegally too. Like, they're saying that I can't legally operate a motor vehicle within the state of New York, but they want me to drive 3 hours to come to this court. So which is it? Can I drive or can I not?
Just don't go and show up 3 days late and say, well, I was walking here and I got stuck in a blizzard. No, that's a really interesting point. But yeah, it's like it would be nothing for them to try this in a different city. Except they have to move the cop back out there. But like, to them, it really doesn't matter, because it's not even you against the state. We're talking about like the state DMV, essentially, right? Because if you don't show up, who wins by default? The DMV. They cut your license.
Yeah.
So, or I guess you don't have one, right? So, yeah.
Go ahead,
I don't
cut my license again. Give me a 9th suspension.
It's so bizarre, and I'm sure this wouldn't work. But like, at the same time, like, and I don't know if anybody's ever tried it, but at the same time, it's like something inside of me is like, I wonder if there's an angle to like at least push back and just irritate the fuck out of them with it, because like realistically, that's nonsense for you to have to illegally drive across the state.
Yeah.
To be extorted.
Yeah, and my public defender on this case is awful. I kind of got into a little tiff with her on the phone yesterday, because I was supposed to be in court yesterday and didn't know that, because my lawyer never told me my updated court date. And she is trying to tell me that it is my responsibility to call her and ask if she got the updated court date yet, to figure it out. And it's entirely my responsibility to know all of this stuff, even though she has not been in communication with me at all since our last court date, which I also didn't attend because I couldn't drive out there. So,
and, you know,
she's just awful.
Part of that is it works different in every state, but so basically here's how it works. The prosecutor wants to put everyone in prison, but they can't unless you have a lawyer. So the prosecutor has to hire a lawyer for you, but he doesn't have to hire any certain number of lawyers. So he'll hire one lawyer to handle 1,000 cases. And basically she's probably pulling her hair out. Like, I can't keep up with this stuff. And they hire amateurs. They hire people who are right out of law school. They don't have a whole lot of experience. So, you know, yeah, it's tough. I always say never go with a public defender unless you absolutely have to. But, and, you know, and these are the reasons why.
Well, if anybody watching wants to represent me pro bono so that I can not have this awful public defender, I would very much appreciate it. But yeah, the unlicensed operation thing is one that I've always, like, even before you and I had the first conversation about like the actual definitions and everything, like I've been off and on license suspended pretty much since I got it, because I had my first ticket I forgot to take care of, and so it's been pretty much a constant off and on since I was like 18 of do I actually have a license? Every time I get pulled over, it's like, am I going to jail today, or am I gonna get to walk away? You know, especially traveling between the states, like about probably 45 states I'm fine to drive in because they can't tell that my license is suspended. But apparently Illinois is one that communicates that with New York, and they knew, and so I got arrested there. It's a shit show. And there's part of me that's sick of dealing with all of that and having to live in that fear. But I also absolutely refuse to pay the like tens of thousands of dollars to get it unsuspended and pay off all of these different fines and fees and all of this crap, which would probably result in so many points on my license that it would get revoked anyway. if all of these cases actually finalized. So I'm just
But they'd have your money.
Yeah, I could just pay an exorbitant
Well, can I get my money
amount.
back? I'm not going to get my license. No. Absolutely not.
So then I would still be doing the
You
same
stole it fair and
crime,
square.
except an actually worse crime, because suspended license is significantly less illegal than a revoked one. And that's like a whole much bigger process to get it back if I ever wanted to. I am much better off just waiting these out until the courts give up on them and they disappear. At least that's my current opinion. I don't know.
Well,
if Hal's still watching, he can tell me I'm dumb.
Yeah, I mean, depending on where the ticket is, might not be so easy. But I can tell you this: I had some tickets in California that I went to court, I fought them, I pled not guilty, and there's different variations to what I did, but basically, they're minor traffic tickets, so they didn't give me a real judge. It's like they would call it a judge pro tem or something else, which under California law is classified as like an emergency worker or something. But it's not a real judge. They're not sworn in, they're not certified, they're not elected, anything of that nature, right? So they have no real judicial authority. But what they do is they pass around a little clipboard and they ask you to sign away your rights and say, like, you know, basically you're going to allow Judge Judy to come in here and convict you without any like consequences for, you know, a wrongful conviction. And so a lot of people sign that, and now you have a contract, and now they basically enforce contract law on you, which they're doing to begin with because the license is a contract. Now, I had a couple of these where they would continue to send me letters and notices saying, hey, you owe us money. And I finally sent them a letter back saying, no, I don't owe you any money. I don't have any contract with you. You know, I'm disputing this. And I disputed it with them according to the Fair Debt Collections and Practices Act, which is a federal law to prevent debt collection harassment. And so basically I told them, you know, I'm demanding that if you have proof that I owe you money, you have to either show me a signed judgment by a duly elected judicial officer, like an actual judge, and a contract or a contract, and, you know, all this other stuff to create this debt that you're claiming that I owe you. And it was so fucking bizarre. They so I did this on several tickets. Most of them, I never heard from them again. One of them, they replied to immediately, and they sent me somebody else's ticket and said, like, they sent me like a copy of somebody else's ticket, and they're like, yeah, here's proof that we have a contract. And I sent them back another letter, and I was like, this is just proof of how incompetent you are. I don't ever want to hear from you again, or I'm going to sue you. And I never heard from them again. So results may vary, but if you want to try that, I'm happy to send you some letters that I wrote. Not legal advice. Use at your own risk. but yeah, that's the thing. And like you said, like driving with a revoked license is much worse than driving with suspended. Driving with suspended is much worse than driving without a license. That's like people will debate this with me, but you don't need a license to drive unless you're doing it for commercial purposes. That's my opinion. That's my illegal opinion. But it's worked for me, and I've never gotten police or judges to admit that, but I have gotten them to dismiss cases, and for some other random bullshit reason that they make up, which is just so bizarre. Why would you make up some stupid reason to dismiss my case if you think that I'm guilty of doing such and such? So yeah, there's if you want to get ballsy with it, I can point you in the right direction. But the first thing you're probably going to have to do is fire the public defender, because she's not going to go along with any of this, and she's going to say it's all wrong.
Yeah. I really think
the judge is going to disbar her or something.
Yeah, I really think that this one is the one that I'm going to dig my heels into, because it was just such a bizarre and bullshit experience. The cop pulled me over, not for doing anything illegal, but because she ran my plates, and it came back that the car is owned and registered to me, who has a suspended license. So she pulled that car over.
She didn't even know you're driving at the time.
I mean, so I'll give her a little bit of credit.
At that point,
that's
right?
fair. I will give her a little bit of credit that she pulled up next to me a couple of times. She followed me for almost 5 minutes, almost all the way through town. But she did pull up next to me at one point in time, and I'm guessing to check at least the gender of the driver. Because if my wife was driving, then she would have just been completely wasting her time. And I'm really looking forward to the day that another cop is bored enough to run my plates and pull us over when she's driving, because my wife will make their life a living hell for wasting her time. But so they didn't even, I didn't do anything noticeably illegal. They had no actual reason to stop me other than the fact that she was so bored that she had enough time to follow a car long enough to run their plates, get the results back, try to double check that I was the one driving, and then pull me over almost 5 minutes later. She dedicated that much time to her day to just pulling over someone who was driving perfectly, because I knew that there was a fucking cop behind me the whole time. So I'm going, exactly the speed limit, accelerating slowly after red lights, which is probably the reason she ran the plates to begin with, because I was probably driving too well.
She's driving too normal. No, that's so I've worked with DUI lawyers who they've seen police use that reasoning to stop people for DUI and give them a DUI. Mm-hmm. He was driving the speed limit in an area where people normally speed, so it was suspicious that he was going the speed. That's they testify to this. Mm-hmm. And the courts accept this as probable cause. So you can't speed because that's probable cause. You can't drive the speed limit because that's probable cause. You can't drive slower than the speed limit because that's probable cause. So basically just being on the road is probable cause.
Yeah.
At that point. And that's what the state will say.
Yeah. And that's what you come to find out when you go through enough of these is, just being on the road. There's the expression driving while black.
Right.
But honestly, just driving is already a suspicion. Where are you going? What are you doing? Who are you taking those drugs to? Oh, you have drugs?
And you fit the description, man.
Mm-hmm. I was having a conversation with my wife the other day about amounts, because we've been driving through the Native American reservation on the other side of the state every time we have to go drop my son off in Indiana. And, it's $50 to $100 ounces, and it's great. So, I stock up when we go through, and then, I only go there once or twice a month. And so I'm driving usually with an ounce or two. And we were having the conversation about that's above and beyond where it would be now, with intent to distribute, and how much worse of a charge that is. But I honestly want to get arrested for that. Like, I would love for somebody to try to tell me in court that I wasn't gonna smoke that whole fucking ounce. Like, please prove that somehow, that I can't smoke 2 ounces in 2 weeks.
So that's an interesting theory. I would look the law at first, because it's like, because this is what they'll do, right? They might call it intent to distribute, but it has nothing to do with your actual intent, because you're right, that would be the thing, right? Like, but like that's kind of the thing with like a murder trial, right? Like, did this person intend to kill somebody? Because if they didn't intend to kill him, it's just manslaughter, right? And this is like, you know, this is the thing. Did this person intend to steal something, or did they forget that they had it in their hand? You have to prove like intent, right? And if you can't prove intent, you can't convict. And that would be, I mean, it's intent to distribute, right? You would have to prove intent. But at the same time, they legislate these things away by saying, well, it doesn't matter if you actually had the intent. We don't have to prove the intent. We just have to say if it weighs more than a certain amount, then that's like, it's de facto intent because we say so, which is bullshit. But that's what the state likes to do. Now, if you want to challenge that, good luck. But I'd look into that first and see like what, because yeah, I mean, like, you make a good point. Like, that's very common these days, like people who can smoke that much. I mean, probably not even these days. I mean, like, I'm sure like Willie Nelson probably always smoked that much, right? Tommy Chong always smoked that much,
right?
But like, yeah, it's insane. And there was even a guy in Texas, right? He had like less than an ounce, right? Of some swag, and he's making brownies out of them. And like, it stunk up the hallway. Someone called the cops. They showed up and they're like, oh, marijuana brownies, you're under arrest. So it was less than an ounce, but it was in the brownie mix now. So now they weighed the brownie mix and it was like 4 pounds. And they charged him with 4 pounds.
Jesus.
It's it's like total bullshit, but it's like, you know, and you can push back, but drug war is a hard one to push back on, because like a lot of people are still like, you know, you're going to get the jury who's going to be like, oh yeah, he's one of those dirty criminals, probably selling it to kindergartners outside the playground or something. Like, you know, right. Like that's what, it sucks, but that's what people think. So it's kind of, I don't know. I guess I would say choose your battles, because like, yeah, you want to make sure people are on your side if you're gonna try to do that.
Yeah, it would definitely depend on which state I was getting pulled over in, because if I'm still in Ohio, like, hell no. But those laws are still pretty strict here in New York, even though even public consumption of cannabis is legal here. I still can't have over, I think it's 2 ounces is the limit here, or it's like 1.5 ounces, something like that. So I would very much like to see somebody in New York and a New York jury try to convict me of intent to distribute for like 2 ounces of weed.
Yeah,
because I can prove that I can smoke that. You can't prove I can't.
Right. But I mean, like, there's like, well, also like intent to distribute, like, isn't it legal to distribute? Like, I guess unless you have a license, right? You need a license. But like when I was in New York like a month ago, and just walking around, and there were people like on every corner just like openly like, here's my joints, would you like one? Like, it was just so out in the open. And like, you know, I can't say like, you know, I saw a cop walk in front of them when they did that. Like, maybe they were keeping an eye out, but they really didn't seem too concerned about it. So you know, I don't know if the cops are just like, we don't care, but it could come down to the same thing too. Like, you know, I told you to get off this corner, I'm going to arrest you, and, you know, whatever. But yeah, it's crazy, man.
Yeah. New York City is, has always been, or not always, but probably for like 4 or 5 years now, been extremely lax on their cannabis enforcement. I know upstate, it's still a little bit nuts. And yeah, I don't know what the penalties are going to look like for unlicensed sale of cannabis, because it's New York, you know, they're going to try to regulate the absolute shit out of it. So
yeah,
I'm glad they did public consumption. That's kind of nice. I can just walk down the street smoking a joint without having to worry about anything.
Right.
So, I do want to go back to the businesses a little bit and just kind of talk about the idea of activism through capitalism and why, we've touched on it a little bit with the, having something to give in response to the money being given to you. But I'm curious why the entrepreneurial focus, because there's most of the people who are, your kind of brainwave are out here making like 17 different packs, and you're trying to make like 17 different companies. And I'm curious where the mindset is that's been keeping you on that entrepreneurial focus.
I mean, honestly, like, that's kind of like where my heart has always been. Like, I mean, when I was like before I was even like any kind of activist, like when I was in high school, I was like, I would go to like the Smart and Final and buy like big packs of like the king size Snickers bars and Butterfingers and everything, and I'd take them to school. And I had this little, like, I just took like a cardboard box and I like cut it so there's a little handle on it, and I cut all the logos off the big boxes and stuck them on the outside, and I would just walk around with it, and people would be like, hey, give me a Snickers. And like, and then it got to the point where like, oh shit, I don't have I think I was selling them for like, was it $1? And like, meanwhile, they were selling like those crappy chocolates for the school fundraisers for $2, and they were like shitty chocolates. And I was like selling these king size Snickers for like $1. And people were like, like, hey, I don't have $1, like spot me for tomorrow. So I started like selling them on credit, and like, it was insane. And like half of them, I was like, man, am I ever going to see this money again? But like people would come and pay, because like eventually they would, they still want to buy some. So, they at some point they'd get cut off. So they would pay. But then like, and I would walk around like this, like I didn't even know this was a problem until one day somebody ran up to me and said, hey, can I get one? And I said, yeah, sure. And I opened it up, and there was like one of those like, schoolyard monitor, whatever people. And I did a transaction right in front of her, and she's like, what is that? That's illegal. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? So she took my candy away and called my parents. And like, and that's when I learned about licenses and regulations. Man. But so yeah, that's kind of like where my heart's always been. And like, I want to start a software company, because like I've always been a developer. I've written lots of software, and I deal with lots of software that's like a pain in the ass, and I know I could do so much better than that. But at the same time, that takes a lot of money, and I don't really want to take investment capital, because I know investment capital usually wants to see government structure. They want a government corporation, and everything that I've done outside of that, where I do an LLO, which is a thing that I started, which is basically a corporation that has nothing to do with government. And so basically trying to figure out how can I run all these businesses, because that's ultimately what I wanted to do, was just run businesses. But then how can I do it without welcoming the government into my home, and taking a part of it? And so it's been a struggle, but that's really kind of, I guess that's just really where my heart is. And like this activism about all this other stuff has I don't want to, it started out as secondary. It's kind of become primary, and now they're just kind of equal. Especially as I learn more about like what's going on with the money system and the criminal justice system, and like all this other stuff, like all that stuff weighs on me a lot. So I really do want to fix those problems, but at the same time, like I recognize a couple things. One, I like running businesses and building these things, right? I think it's like a natural human desire to build things, right? Whether it's a house or a family or a business or a skyscraper, like, or a race car, or like, people like to build things. And so this is kind of like what I like to build. And then also seeing that activism doesn't really pay well unless it's the sort of activism that's like the corruptible activism, or like the bullshit donations like BLM, or like, like the I don't know, climate change, or like any of this stuff where it's like all this money's just being laundered into the pockets of politicians. Like, yeah, there's money in that, but that I see as completely unethical, and I don't want to participate in any of that. So what kind of political activism can I do to generate some money, knowing that there's none in here, unless I raise my own money through my own projects and kind of like create this like symbiotic relationship between them. So that's kind of that's kind of, I think, where I've ended up, is like trying to take the best of these two worlds and put them together, and build what I'm trying to build on both together. And hopefully that inspires a lot of other people to build the same kinds of things, because I think this is like, this could be a successful structure moving forward, getting a lot of money into the liberty movement, by creating businesses that are willing to put their own bottom line on the line, so to speak, to help invest in liberty activism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do want to talk a little bit about the LLO structure that you mentioned there, because even as, you know, a hardcore libertarian, anarchist, whatever, most of the time, if I'm having a conversation with a statist and we're talking about taxes, I will concede business taxes as something that, like, we can leave those alone, at least for now, because it's not, it's like at least a little bit consensual. You know, you're choosing to go into business and do all of this under these legal operations. You're signing the EIN paperwork and all this other stuff. Like, you're consenting to those taxes, where no one consented to income tax or property tax or anything like that. So I'll usually concede that point to people. And, you know, you're bringing up a really good point about, like, how do we become entrepreneurs without inviting the government in? So tell people, what is an LLO and how does that work?
Yeah, so basically the concept is this, right? Like, what is a corporation? Most people, I think, have this perception that a corporation is asset protection, which is like, that's how I was introduced to it. So when I was in California and I was learning about how to start a business, and like a lot of it was like real estate kind of stuff, like everyone was like, yeah, you always want to have a corporation, so if you get sued, they don't take your personal assets, and, you know, all this other stuff. And like, that's just the thing. Like, it was popular, like like how everyone had an Apple iWatch, everyone had a corporation. That was like the thing to do. I'm the CEO, and like, which was total bullshit, because you're CEO of a one employee corporation, but it's like, okay, whatever. And it's like, and the sell was that, like, you'd pay less in taxes and you'd have asset protection if you ever got sued. Mm-hmm. In reality, that wasn't really ever the purpose of a corporation. Like, the purpose of a corporation was to say, like, there's 100 of us, we're going to go into business and we're going to raise money from like tens of thousands of investors. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create this legal fiction, this new entity, and we're going to give it a name, and it's going to have shares, and it's going to have a constitution or bylaws. And it's basically going to operate, and it's like, it's the same as the government, right? You elect controllers of it. The shareholders are the ones who get to vote, and it's a business, and it's meant for profit, and people hold the shares because they want the dividends, or the, you know, that kind of thing. And that's what it was. It was a way to organize a contract among people so that you could have a big organization of hundreds or thousands of people functioning in a way that serves the owners of it, or serves the employees, or like the, you know, because ideally, I know there's like a whole lot of like slave master relationship in there, like that people will get on about. Mm-hmm. You know, why should we work for Walmart? That's the whole other story. But like, to be able to build this associative, voluntary, I guess that's the way I see it, is it would be a voluntary organization. Mm-hmm. But the whole point of the corporation is to like be that structure where you have a set of rules: who's going to make the decisions, who's going to be the chief executive officer, who's going to be the treasurer, who gets to vote, who makes the day-to-day decisions, what's the business about, you know, that sort of thing. Having shareholder meetings every year. And you know, at some point I was like, when I came to that realization that, like, no, that's really what a corporation is about. It's not about, I mean, asset protection, sure, but the only asset protection you get from it that you couldn't get from a regular contract is kind of illegitimate. So like, if I'm working for a corporation and I dump toxic sludge on your front lawn, well, you can't sue me because you got to sue the corporation. And even if you take the corporation for all they're got, well, maybe they're already bankrupt, and then you get nothing. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, I get off scot-free because I'm just an employee of the corporation, right? That doesn't make any sense. That's not legitimate. I should be charged as a crime because I'm like putting toxic crap all over your, like, I should know that's illegal. And even if my boss is telling me to do it, I should be like, no, that's illegal. I can't do that.
Right.
So it, if anything, it grants you an illegal protection or an illegitimate protection. But if you're a customer of mine and I want to make sure that you don't sue me personally, well, like I can say, okay, well, when you buy from me, you sign the terms and conditions that says you recognize me as a corporation. You're not going to sue the employees. You're not going to sue the shareholders. You can sue the corporation for whatever the corporation is worth. And we'll make public statements about what the, so when you're, because when you're doing business with a company, you want to know like, hey, there's some sort of insurance, right?
Right.
Like that's what like being bonded and insured is about. When you have like a doctor who's got malpractice insurance, or a plumber who's got, a surety bond, like any of that kind of stuff, right? Like that's what it's about. And so it's basically like, we're presenting this as an organization that this is what we're worth, so you can do business with us in confidence that if we sell you a product that blows up and sets your house on fire, you can sue us, and this is what it's worth, but you promise not to sue individually any of the people involved in it because it's accidental. If we commit a crime against you, well, we don't want any extra protection from that because that's kind of unethical to begin with, right? So if our employees lie to you in selling you a product, sue that employee, right? And if we gave him the instructions saying that, like, if the person wrote, the sales manual that says you're allowed to tell them this and gave the salesperson the wrong information, that person should be held liable. Like, sure, that's fine, but if you organize everything in a way where as long as we're not talking about crimes, if there's something that's done that harms you, like, you treat this as a regular government certified corporation, even though it's not. And that's really the idea behind it. It's experimental. So far we haven't been sued, so we haven't really put it to the test, and I don't plan to be anytime soon. But I'm hoping to, I'm hoping that more people kind of learn about this idea and try it out themselves. And I hope, like, not to say that I hope somebody gets sued, but I hope, at some point in the future it could get put to the test, and see, is a court going to recognize this based on the fact that it is really just a series of legal contracts, and, why shouldn't they recognize them?
I'm going to sue you just so I can see Fite versus Fluffy Kitten on a docket somewhere.
That would be, you know what? We should do that. That's not a bad idea.
You just have to, like, somehow do something
like a
wrong.
$1 lawsuit about, we'll come up with an issue, and we'll see if it sticks, and then we'll appeal it all the way to the high courts and make sure it still sticks. Like, why not? That could be awesome.
That would be fun. Yeah, because I'm a big fan of the LLO structure. It's a little bit, like you're saying, like, experimental, and I'm excited to see how it does actually play out, if it has to play out in any of those kind of serious scenarios. I just started a company with a good friend of mine who is very much about dotting all of the I's and crossing all of the T's, and I floated the idea for a few seconds of an LLO and got shot down so fucking hard. He was like, no, we are going to be certified, regulated, all of the above. And I'm like, fine, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah,
and
pay
taxes.
It's tough. I mean, like this is kind of the world we live in, where, like, people are like, this doesn't sound legal, let me run it by my lawyer, and the lawyer's gonna be like, no, you just do it. Why don't you want to just do a corporation? Because I hate the government. Well, just do a corporate. Like, that's what they're gonna say, right? Yeah. Like, it doesn't matter how much you hate it, they're gonna give you the line about everything, death and taxes, and and it's insane. But yeah, and it sucks because, like, it is preventing us from getting investors, because they want to see that. But at the same time, it's kind of like I'm more attached to the idea of seeing this work than I am attached to the idea of seeing a business turn into, like, something amazing with, like, hundreds of millions of dollars of investment capital, just because we signed a government contract.
Yeah.
So, I'd rather see, and, there's different ways to do it. Like, I started a trucking company with some friends in Uganda, and we in order to operate there, because it's even less of a free country than the United States, they had to incorporate. Like, that was like, they wouldn't be able to drive trucks around, right? Mm-hmm. So they did incorporate, but at the same time, we created an LLO which is not really in any country and it's not recognized by any government, and that LLO owns the corporation. So and we did find a couple investors. We raised like probably 20-25 grand, not a whole lot, but that went into the LLO, and then from the LLO into the into the, actually the LLO bought the truck itself, and so the truck is being held by one of the employees with a contract, and then there's a corporation which is owned by the LLO. So like there's different layers to how it works, and there are people out there who are willing to experiment with this. I mean, look at how much money people put into crypto, right? Which is like highly disputed as legitimate.
Yeah.
But there's billions of dollars going into it, or at least were billions of dollars. So it's the same kind of thing. Like I think there are some people out there who are willing to experiment. I know it's like it's keeping me out of like some traditional opportunities, but this is more interesting to me than than building it the traditional way, I think.
Yeah. Well, you've given me a fun little side project, is to talk to all of my funders and partners and see if I can find anyone out there that'll give a loan to an LLO.
Yeah. I mean, it's and here's the interesting thing. So like with the truck company, it's like if there was a government document that had to have something, like, for example, like the truck has to be registered and they're not going to recognize the LLO, we'll register it to a person, but that person will sign a contract basically saying that they're holding it in trust.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not their truck, even though it's registered in their name. That's just a formality to make the government happy. The truck still belongs to the LLO. So if at any point they're like, okay, well, I quit, I'm not going to work here anymore. Which isn't going to, I mean, it's in the name of the officers anyway. So it's not like somebody who's just going to walk away. But like, if that were the case, they wouldn't be able to walk away with the truck, because we'd still be able to say that truck belongs to the LLO, and we would have a contract with that employee saying you don't own that truck, even though it's registered in your name. So like there's all kinds of ways to make that possible. Even with the loans, the only difference would be, I guess in the case of a loan, you would make sure, like, if the company goes bankrupt, that they don't come to you personally, versus saying, well, just liquidate whatever's left of the LLO and we'll take that.
Yeah. And I think the where was I going with this? The concept of like the social contract, and like this idea that we're all kind of signed it by being born, and there's this understanding of how all of these things work. Like a corporation, a government recognized corporation ends up being the same as the LLO once you've signed the terms and services with the LLO. It's just like an assumed contract versus an actual in writing contract. It's really the only difference here.
Yeah.
And you just take the assumption out of it and actually put stuff into actual writing. Sure, it's a bunch more paperwork than you might have had to do if it was just a straight corporation, but you're still covering all of your bases. You're getting all of that done, and without having to operate under the guise of the government. It's not as confusing as it sounds. It's just making sure that the stuff that normally would be assumed is actually in writing somewhere and enforceable.
Right. Yeah, and it makes it more intentional too. Like, I think that's like, I mean, like, imagine you walk into a fast food restaurant and you order something and you eat it, and you don't even know it, but you basically just signed a contract with them, because you're not going to hold the people in that restaurant, those employees, you're not going to hold them liable, because there's a corporation. Mm-hmm. And the only legal requirement they have to inform you of that relationship, that virtual contract, is to put like ink by their name. Like, that's the only legal requirement, right? And and to have a corporation. But it's like, if you were to walk in there and like it says, you swipe your card for your food and it says, I agree to the terms and conditions, then it's like, you might stop and think like, okay, what is this? And then it might turn into like oh, there's a big scandal. There's this fast food, like, because nobody reads them anyways, right? There's this fast food scandal, and it says if you read the terms and conditions, even if you get food poisoning, like, that's your own problem. Like, something like terrible. I don't know. Like, if they don't clean their bathrooms and you get like AIDS from the toilet seat, I don't know, dude. Like, just something like so ridiculous is in there in the terms, and it's like, if an employee decides to shoot you, like, you can't hold liable, like, whatever. Then it's like there's going to be a public scandal about that, and people are going to stop going to that restaurant. So it's not like someone is like, it's not like that's going to be completely abused. And I'm sure there's going to be some dirty corporations or dirty LLOs that might try to do that.
Yeah.
But and hopefully public opinion comes back and shuts their business down. But yeah, it's like it gives you an opportunity to stop and recognize that you're actually signing a contract where there's fine print, instead of just like this natural, like, oh yeah, like, it's, what do you mean? I give them money, they give me food, and there's like all this hidden stuff going on behind the scenes.
Right. Yeah, and similarly with, employment contracts, or even with a regular corporation, you still have to have most of that. Yeah, I don't know. I personally think that the LLO structure is like revolutionary, and I hope that there are lots and lots of them coming up soon. If you're watching this and you're thinking about starting a company, especially if the thing that's holding you back is incorporation fees, start an LLO. Where can people find out more about that? And like, do you have like a website or anything describing how that works?
So Thomas Queter actually came up with the name. It's called fluffykitten.ninja is the website. I don't know why we did .ninja, but Fluffy Kitten, because we basically wanted to make the point that, if somebody ever tries to sue the Fluffy Kitten, then we're in hard times. But yeah, we kind of like, we wanted to make something that's kind of absurd to the idea of what it is. I guess we wanted to make sure that like it wasn't perceived as, some really kind of devious plan, because like if this turns out to be a legitimate thing, just like cryptocurrencies or blockchain, government's going to come out and try to stop it or regulate it. And it's gonna be a really hard time for them to demonize something called Fluffy Kitten. So
it's gonna be great. All right, so fluffykitten.ninja, go check that out. Lots of great stuff to be seen and heard. And yeah, I just really want to see more and more of these pop up, because it just makes sense to me. And there's so many entrepreneurs in the movement, and so many of them, that is their hang up. It's like, I don't have $300 to throw away at an incorporation fee before I can make my first sale. Well, there you go. You've got your answer.
Yeah. And another thing too is like the idea of this is that it's supposed to be kind of open source. So if you want to do it a little bit differently, you can make your own version of it. I mean, it's there's some template contracts up there. And you can modify them however you want. That's really the idea. And so if you have new ideas, like we want to experiment with it. We want people to try different things. We want people to look at it and scrutinize it and say like, well, okay, this sounds good, but like it would be better if, something else, and come up with new ideas. Because I'm definitely, not a rocket scientist when it comes to all kinds of stuff with like contracts and all this stuff. So, any additional input from anybody, like let's really turn this into an open source community project.
You heard him, Jonathan. If you're still watching, go read it all and pick it apart. I'm curious your opinions. Before we wrap up, I want to give you a chance to tell people about all the other things that you're doing and where they can find you, follow you, hear more about your awesome projects, and maybe new companies that are coming.
I think I went over most of it, man.
Sure.
danforfreedom.com. There's taxationstuff.info. I teach people all the information on what the tax code actually is and why you probably don't have to pay it. That one's that's another thing where it's really, really important, really close to me, because the IRS is a scam and they're stealing all of our wealth, and taxing us into poverty. There's another project I'm working on where we're going to be buying apartment buildings and turning them into condos. So basically, the people who are already there, who might be, let's say, left-leaning Democrats who are complaining about the cost of living, they're going to be they're not going to have to do anything. They're going to continue to pay the same monthly rent that they have. But a few years down the line, they're actually going to own the place that they're living in, which means their rent goes away. So this is it's a project I've been working on. It's gone through a bunch of different phases, but it looks like we finally settled on exactly how we're going to make it work now, and we've got some people who are really interested in it. So that's going to be a really amazing big project. And again, it's like one of those things where it's this one's actually kind of nonprofit, but it's kind of entrepreneurial. It solves a massive problem. And it solves a political problem. So it's, this is something, again, that like I'm really passionate about. Yeah, I don't know. I'll probably think of something tomorrow.
Are you still doing the show?
I got a million things. What's that?
Is the show still a thing that's happening, or
I haven't done a show in a while. I've been meaning to. I just have so many different projects going on. It's been really difficult. But yeah, I want to say I'm going to pick it back up soon, but I really have no idea when.
That is very much relatable. I took like a solid 4 months off after I got married, just 0 episodes at all.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you so much for watching. You heard him. Go on over to taxationistheft.info to find out why you shouldn't be dealing with the IRS at all. Dan for Texas on Twitter. Just go on over, follow him, and find out about all of the cool, wonderful things that he's doing so that you can maybe be a part of it and like buy some wine and weed and other things. Dan, thanks so much for coming on. This was great.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.
All right, guys. Again, thanks so much for watching. Catch us back here next week for an interview with Josh Eagle from Students for Liberty to talk about how we are getting young people all over the world fired up about liberty. But until then, keep up the fight.